Have you ever heard the saying, "Don't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm"? This is a powerful reminder, deeply rooted in ancient wisdom, echoing the teachings of Stoicism. While it may seem noble to always be the one who gives, this can often be misunderstood, transforming the virtue of kindness into a path of self-destruction. What is the cost of endless giving? The truth is, kindness that drains your own resources, energy, and well-being is not a virtue but a route to personal collapse. Many people have lost their way by giving so much of themselves that they end up feeling hollow and depleted. It is invaluable to be kind, but it is equally important to be kind to oneself. This is the art of balanced generosity, a principle that ensures our actions not only benefit others, but also safeguard our own well-being. In this reflection, we will explore how Stoic principles can help you establish healthy boundaries, turning your kindness into a source of strength rather than exhaustion. Together, we will examine how to give without losing yourself, how to love without wounding your spirit, and how to remain present in your own life while supporting others. The idea of not setting yourself on fire to warm others warns us of the dangers of overextending kindness. Marcus Aurelius, a wise Stoic philosopher, would have cautioned against this very thing. Imagine yourself as someone who is always eager to help others, never saying no. It's as if you are giving away pieces of yourself until there's nothing left. You become the person everyone turns to, but when you reflect on your own needs, you realize that your cup is empty. True kindness isn't just about being good to others, it's also about being good to yourself. Marcus would remind us that our first duty is to take care of our own well-being, for without that, we cannot genuinely support those around us. Consider the story of two neighboring gardeners. One of them diligently tended to his own garden, understanding the importance of self-care and proper balance. His land became lush and abundant, a source of personal joy and surplus to share with his neighbors. The other gardener, despite owning his own plot of land, spent most of his time tending to everyone else's gardens. Neglecting his own, his soil dried up, his plants withered, and his harvest was meager. In trying to be helpful to others, he lost sight of his own needs, leaving both his garden and himself depleted. This parable reminds us to pause and reflect before rushing to aid others. Ask yourself, is my help sustainable? Am I maintaining my own well-being? The ancient Stoics would encourage us to practice Stoicism by setting healthy boundaries, ensuring that in our pursuit of kindness, we do not forget to be kind to ourselves. After all, you cannot give from an empty vessel. Stoicism teaches us how to maintain inner peace and integrity while contributing positively to the world, leading to a balanced and fulfilling life, not just for ourselves, but for those we care for. Generosity is a virtue that enriches our lives and the lives of those around us. However, it comes with a subtle trap when exercised without moderation. Stoicism, an ancient philosophy that still resonates with its wisdom today, reminds us of the delicate balance between offering help with an open heart and expecting reciprocity. Life has a way of showing us that the kindness we offer today may be forgotten tomorrow. This is not a reflection of our worth or the value of our actions, but rather the natural course of human memory and gratitude. Think of your kindness as planting a tree. You nurture it, hoping it will grow and perhaps one day provide shade or fruit. But nature follows its own path, with storms, droughts, and changing seasons. Similarly, when we extend kindness, we must release the expectation of a direct return. The Stoics, especially Epictetus, advised us to focus on our actions, not their outcomes. Some things are within our control and others are not, he said, reminding us that the joy of giving should come from the act itself, not from the anticipation of reward. Embracing this mindset shields us from the sting of unmet expectations, teaching us emotional resilience and allowing us to remain generous and kind without feeling drained or exploited. This doesn't mean we should harden our hearts or withdraw our kindness. Instead, Stoicism encourages us to view our acts of generosity as reflections of our character, not as transactions. By doing so, we not only protect our peace of mind, but also cultivate a form of generosity that is pure, self-sufficient, and deeply fulfilling. This Stoic principle urges us to give freely but wisely, ensuring that our kindness enriches us, regardless of the world's response. In your daily interactions, consider the principle of giving without expectation. Think of a specific scenario where you could offer kindness or support without seeking anything in return. Reflect on practical steps you could take to ensure that your generosity remains a source of personal fulfillment rather than depletion. The art of saying no with confidence marks a pivotal change in your relationship with the world. It signifies that you are no longer the primary resource for every request or demand. This newfound confidence sends a message of self-respect, which in turn invites respect from others. Cicero, a beacon of Stoic philosophy, captured this truth when he said, "What you think of yourself is much more important than what others think of you." By setting boundaries and practicing self-discipline, we not only protect our mental and emotional well-being, but also command respect from those around us. Remember, saying no is an act of self-respect and a testament to the respect you demand from the world. Embrace this mantra and watch how it reshapes your life, fostering mutual respect based on dignity and self-worth. Yet, implementing this change is not without its challenges. Always being available can lead to a harsh reality where your openness might exclude you from moments of joy, confining you to the role of a helper absent during moments of leisure. This realization, though bitter, serves as a test of resilience in discerning genuine connections from transactional interactions. Did you know that the practice of setting boundaries, a core Stoic principle, not only enhances our personal well-being, but also improves the quality of our relationships? It's an interesting but true aspect of human psychology. When we respect ourselves enough to say no, we often earn the respect of others in return. This paradoxical effect underscores the transformative power of self-respect and discernment. By embracing Stoic wisdom, we not only protect ourselves from burnout, but also cultivate relationships that are truly enriching and reciprocal. By embracing Stoic wisdom, we protect ourselves from burnout, while fostering relationships that are both enriching and reciprocal. This balance between self-care and outward kindness is a delicate dance, but it is essential for living a life rooted in virtue and fulfillment. If we give indiscriminately, without regard for our own needs, we not only drain our resources, but also risk diminishing the quality of our relationships. People may come to expect more from us than we can sustain, leading to resentment and frustration on both sides. This is where Stoicism guides us with clarity. It teaches us to prioritize self-respect alongside our generosity. We must give from a place of abundance, not scarcity. And abundance, as the Stoics understood, doesn't refer only to material wealth, but to emotional and mental reserves, our inner peace and sense of self-worth. When we are secure in who we are, we can offer help freely, without fear of being depleted. Our kindness becomes a choice, not an obligation, and our relationships shift from being transactional to truly meaningful. The Stoic philosophers were masters of introspection, urging us to look inward before we act outward. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." This reflection can be applied to our own acts of kindness. We should not fear saying no or setting boundaries, but we should fear losing ourselves by constantly sacrificing our own needs for others. In giving too much of ourselves without replenishing our inner resources, we risk losing sight of our own lives. Imagine, for a moment, that your life is a vessel. Every time you give to others, your time, your energy, your emotional support, you pour from this vessel. If you do not take time to refill it, eventually it will run dry. And when it does, not only will you have nothing left to give, but you will also feel empty and lost. The Stoics would advise us to be mindful of this balance, to ensure that in our acts of generosity, we do not forget to take care of ourselves. To truly cultivate a life of virtue and contentment, we must recognize that self-care is not selfish. It is, in fact, the foundation of our ability to help others. Epictetus, another great Stoic philosopher, often emphasized the importance of controlling what is within our power and letting go of what is not. This lesson applies beautifully to our relationships. We can control our actions, our generosity, and our boundaries, but we cannot control how others will respond or what they will expect. When we accept this, we free ourselves from the burden of constant self-sacrifice. In a practical sense, this means learning to recognize when you're overextended and when your acts of kindness are no longer coming from a place of genuine desire, but from a sense of obligation. It means paying attention to your own emotional and physical health, asking yourself whether you are giving out of abundance or depletion. And it means becoming comfortable with the idea that sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is to say no. Let's consider another story, one that illuminates the Stoic approach to boundaries and self-care. A wise mentor once had two apprentices. One apprentice worked tirelessly to please everyone, taking on tasks and responsibilities far beyond his capacity, always afraid of letting others down. The other apprentice focused on mastering his own craft, setting clear limits on what he could do, but offering his help wholeheartedly within those boundaries. As time passed, the first apprentice became overwhelmed, his work suffering, and his relationships fraying under the weight of his constant overcommitment. The second apprentice, however, flourished. He was able to give his best effort in everything he did, not because he gave endlessly, but because he gave wisely. This is the lesson of Stoicism, that true strength lies in knowing your limits and acting with intention. It is not about being everything to everyone, but about being true to yourself and to those you care for in a way that is sustainable and meaningful. In relationships, whether personal or professional, it's easy to fall into the trap of feeling like we must always be available, always ready to serve. But as the Stoics would remind us, we are not endless wells of energy and time. To live a life of virtue, we must also live a life of balance. We must cultivate a sense of self-worth that is independent of what we can do for others, and instead, focus on what we can do for ourselves, so that when we give, we do so from a place of genuine abundance. This brings us to a critical aspect of Stoic thought, emotional resilience. By practicing mindful generosity and establishing boundaries, we develop the resilience to navigate the ups and downs of life without being overwhelmed by them. We can offer help to others without losing ourselves in the process, and we can engage with the world in a way that enriches both our lives and the lives of those around us. Ultimately, Stoicism invites us to live intentionally. It encourages us to reflect on our actions, our motivations, and our boundaries. It teaches us that by being mindful of our own needs, we are better equipped to serve others. This is the path to true kindness, a kindness that is rooted in self-awareness, balance, and resilience. So, as you move through your daily life, ask yourself, Are you setting yourself on fire to keep others warm? Or are you cultivating a steady, nurturing flame that both supports your well-being and lights the way for those around you? Remember, it's not about saying no to kindness. It's about saying yes to yourself first, so that your kindness can truly flourish and inspire others in the most profound way possible. As you continue to walk the path of Stoicism, the idea of cultivating that steady, nurturing flame becomes essential to living a balanced life, a life that is both virtuous and sustainable. The Stoics remind us again and again that our power lies not in our ability to exhaust ourselves for others, but in our ability to govern ourselves with wisdom, self-respect, and compassion. Marcus Aurelius, in his Reflections, constantly emphasized the need for clarity of mind and purpose. He understood that life, with its endless demands and distractions, can easily pull us off course. But by returning to our core values, by anchoring ourselves in self-awareness and disciplined action, we can remain centered no matter what external pressures we face. Consider your kindness as a beacon, not a bonfire. A bonfire, while bright and fierce, eventually burns out if not tended carefully, its flames consuming everything in their path. A beacon, however, is steady, controlled, and purposeful. It shines its light without burning itself out, serving as a guide for others while standing strong in its place. This is the kind of kindness that Stoicism encourages us to cultivate. It is not a kindness that demands martyrdom or self-sacrifice, but one that reflects inner strength, balance, and wisdom. There is an inherent beauty in this approach to life. The more you invest in your own well-being, the more you have to offer to others. The Stoics would argue that this isn't selfishness, it's self-mastery. Only by mastering ourselves, by attending to our own needs and fostering our own growth, can we truly be of service to the world. This is the art of wise giving, offering your best self to others without losing yourself in the process. Seneca, another profound Stoic thinker, spoke of the need to approach life with moderation. He wrote, "Nothing is more honorable than a grateful heart." To him, this wasn't just about being grateful for what we receive, but also about being grateful for the ability to give wisely. Seneca would caution us against reckless generosity, urging us instead to give mindfully and to ensure that our kindness stems from a place of genuine intention rather than a desire to please or an obligation to meet others' expectations. By practicing gratitude for our own capacity to give, we can shift our perspective. Instead of viewing acts of kindness as something that drains us, we see them as expressions of our inner abundance. When we are grateful for our own strength, for our ability to set boundaries, and for the opportunities we have to be kind within those boundaries, we are practicing a form of Stoic wisdom that enriches both our lives and the lives of those we touch. And what of the expectations of others? Stoicism teaches us that we cannot control what others demand or expect from us, only how we respond. Epictetus famously said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This principle applies to all areas of life, including how we handle the demands others place upon us. When we internalize the Stoic understanding that we are responsible only for our own actions, not for how others perceive them or what they expect, we free ourselves from the burden of trying to please everyone. This realization is liberating. It allows us to serve others from a place of true generosity, untainted by guilt or fear of rejection. We can offer what we have, knowing that it is enough, and that our worth is not measured by how much we give or how much others demand. This clarity gives us the freedom to say no when necessary, not out of selfishness, but out of a deep respect for ourselves and the finite nature of our resources. The art of boundary setting is essential in Stoic practice because it is about honoring our own limitations. Stoicism doesn't teach us to withdraw from the world or to become indifferent to the needs of others. On the contrary, it encourages us to engage deeply and meaningfully with life. However, it also teaches us that this engagement must be balanced with self-care, reflection, and a clear understanding of our own capacities. If we are to be resilient, if we are to maintain our sense of peace and purpose, we must learn to say no with as much grace as we say yes. This is not an act of shutting people out. It is an act of inviting ourselves in, of creating space for our own growth, for our own well-being, and for the clarity that allows us to contribute meaningfully without losing ourselves in the process. Think of it this way. If you give everything you have to others without replenishing your own spirit, what will be left for the next person who needs your help? What will be left for you when you are the one in need? Stoicism teaches us that we must be stewards of our own lives, that we are responsible for cultivating the strength and peace that will allow us to weather life's storms. And part of that responsibility is knowing when to step back, when to rest, and when to say, I need to take care of myself first. There is no shame in this. In fact, it is one of the highest forms of wisdom, for in taking care of ourselves, we are not only protecting our own well-being, but we are also ensuring that we can continue to be a source of light and strength for others. This is the paradox of Stoic kindness. By prioritizing our own health, we become more capable of helping those around us. And as we give, let us remember to give with intention, not out of obligation or expectation. Stoicism teaches us to be present in our actions, to give because it aligns with our values, not because we hope to receive something in return. When we give freely, without the weight of expectation, our kindness is pure, and our generosity becomes a source of joy rather than a burden. This is the essence of Stoic living. It is about cultivating a life of balance, wisdom, and intentional action. It is about giving generously but wisely, living fully but mindfully, and always remaining true to ourselves. By embracing these principles, we not only enrich our own lives, but also create a ripple effect of positive influence, inspiring others to do the same. So, as you move forward, carry with you the Stoic mantra: be kind, but be kind to yourself first. Let your kindness be a beacon that shines steadily, a light that guides both yourself and others without burning out. In this way, your life will become a testament to the power of balanced generosity, a life where kindness flows freely, but always from a well that is full. As we continue this journey toward understanding the Stoic art of balanced generosity, it's crucial to recognize that living this way allows us to access a deeper reservoir of strength, wisdom, and fulfillment. By being kind to ourselves first, we ensure that we can be truly kind to others, and by setting boundaries, we protect not only our own well-being, but the quality and sincerity of our kindness. This delicate balance between self-care and outward generosity is what makes Stoic living both resilient and compassionate. One of the most profound aspects of Stoicism is its emphasis on self-mastery. The Stoics understood that external circumstances are often beyond our control, but our inner state, our thoughts, attitudes, and reactions, is entirely within our power. This understanding gives us the freedom to live with intention, rather than being swept along by the tides of expectation, guilt, or societal pressures. It is in this space of self-mastery that we find the strength to set boundaries, to say no when necessary, and to give from a place of abundance rather than depletion. But how do we cultivate this inner strength? How do we ensure that our lives are guided by virtue and wisdom, rather than by the demands of others? The answer lies in reflection and daily practice. The Stoics believed in the importance of regular self-examination, a habit of looking inward to assess our actions, motivations, and emotional responses. By taking time each day to reflect on our experiences, we gain clarity about where we might be overextending ourselves and where we need to recalibrate. This process of reflection allows us to recognize when our kindness is veering into the territory of self-sacrifice. It helps us see the moments when we are giving more than we can afford to, emotionally or physically. In those moments, Stoic wisdom urges us to pause and ask ourselves, am I giving in a way that respects my own needs and limits? Am I offering kindness in a way that will allow me to continue being kind? Or am I setting myself up for burnout? The Stoics believed that self-discipline and moderation are the keys to a virtuous life. This doesn't mean withdrawing from life's challenges or becoming indifferent to the needs of others. Rather, it means approaching life with a calm and measured mindset, ensuring that our actions align with our values and that we maintain balance in all things. Whether we are giving our time, energy, or resources, it is essential to do so in a way that reflects our inner wisdom rather than external pressures. This brings us to another core Stoic principle, the importance of focusing on what is within our control. The Stoics remind us that we cannot control how others respond to our kindness, nor can we control their expectations. What we can control is our own attitude and the boundaries we set for ourselves. This recognition is liberating because it frees us from the burden of trying to please everyone or meet unrealistic demands. Instead, we can focus on offering what we can from a place of sincerity and strength and let go of the rest. Imagine a tree, deeply rooted and resilient. It offers shade, shelter, and fruit to those around it, but it does so according to its natural cycle. It doesn't force itself to bear fruit out of season, nor does it strain to provide more than it is capable of. The tree is generous, but it is also wise, knowing that in order to give, it must first be strong and healthy. This is the kind of generosity that Stoicism teaches us to cultivate. A generosity that is grounded in self-awareness, balance, and respect for our own natural limits. This idea of wise giving extends to all areas of life, not just in our relationships with others, but also in how we manage our own energy, time, and emotional resources. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that saying yes to every request or constantly putting others' needs before our own is the path to virtue. But the Stoics would remind us that true virtue lies in living in accordance with reason and nature nature teaches us that everything has its limits. Seneca, in his writings on the shortness of life, reflected on how often we waste our most precious resource, time, by giving it away too freely, without considering whether it is being well spent. He would argue that just as we are mindful of our financial resources, we should be equally mindful of our time and energy. Every moment we spend on others is a moment we are not spending on our own growth, well-being, or personal goals. This doesn't mean we should be selfish with our time, but rather that we should be intentional about how we use it, ensuring that it serves both others and ourselves in a balanced way. When we apply this thinking to our acts of kindness, we begin to see the importance of prioritizing our own needs alongside those of others. Stoicism teaches us that in order to be truly helpful and present for the people we care about, we must first be in a good state ourselves. This is not selfishness. It is self-respect and wisdom. Just as we would never expect an exhausted athlete to run a marathon without first resting and refueling, we should not expect ourselves to give endlessly without taking the time to nurture our own well-being. Moreover, the Stoics would advise us to embrace the idea of detachment when it comes to our acts of generosity. This doesn't mean detaching from people or becoming indifferent to their needs, but rather detaching from the outcomes of our actions. When we give with no strings attached, we free ourselves from the burden of expectation. We are no longer giving in order to receive something in return, whether it's gratitude, recognition, or a sense of validation. Instead, we give because it aligns with our values and because it brings us a deeper sense of fulfillment. By detaching from the need for external validation, we also protect ourselves from disappointment and resentment. How many times have we given to someone only to feel hurt when our efforts were not appreciated or reciprocated? The Stoics remind us that such expectations are not within our control. What is within our control is the act of giving itself, the intention behind it, and the wisdom with which we approach it. This is why the Stoics place such a high value on living with purpose and intention. Each action we take should be a reflection of our highest values, of kindness, wisdom, and self-respect. When we give from this place of purpose, we are not drained or diminished by our generosity. Instead, we are uplifted by it, knowing that we have acted in accordance with our true nature. In this way, Stoicism invites us to redefine what it means to be kind. It encourages us to view kindness not as a burden or a source of exhaustion, but as an expression of our inner strength and clarity. When we practice kindness in a way that honors both ourselves and others, we create a life that is balanced, meaningful, and sustainable. So as you move through your days, take time to reflect on how you are giving. Are you giving from a place of abundance, or are you depleting yourself in the process? Are you setting healthy boundaries, or are you allowing the expectations of others to dictate your actions? And most importantly, are you being kind to yourself in the same way that you strive to be kind to others? By integrating these Stoic principles into your life, you will find that your kindness becomes a source of strength, not weakness. You will give more wisely, love more deeply, and live more fully, all while remaining true to yourself and your own well-being. This is the essence of Stoic living: to act with intention, to give with wisdom, and to live in harmony with both yourself and the world around you. As you continue down this path of Stoic wisdom, it becomes clear that the core of Stoic teaching is not just about self-restraint or endurance, but about living harmoniously within the natural limits of life. This harmony includes a balanced approach to kindness, generosity, and self-care, a path that allows us to cultivate a life of deep meaning and fulfillment without being overwhelmed by the demands of others. The Stoics understood that life is a constant balancing act between what is within our control and what is not. To live virtuously, we must embrace the things we can influence, our actions, choices, and responses, while accepting that much of what happens around us lies beyond our reach. This mindset, when applied to the way we give to others, can profoundly transform how we approach relationships and generosity. One of the key teachings of Stoicism is the idea of living according to nature, or in harmony with the universe. For the Stoics, this meant recognizing the natural rhythms and limits of life. Just as the seasons change, and just as nature requires periods of rest and renewal, so too do we. There are times to give, to extend ourselves, and to offer support to those in need. But there are also times when we must retreat, renew our energy, and focus inward to ensure we remain strong and whole. Living according to nature also means recognizing the impermanence of things. The Stoics were deeply aware of the fleeting nature of life, relationships, and circumstances. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that life is short and that we should cherish each moment. In the context of generosity, this awareness helps us let go of the need for control or permanence. We can give freely, knowing that the outcomes are not ours to dictate. The gratitude or acknowledgement we might hope for may never come, but that does not diminish the value of the act itself. This Stoic detachment from outcomes liberates us from the emotional traps that often accompany giving. When we offer our time, energy, or resources to others, we naturally hope for appreciation or reciprocity. But the Stoics would remind us that these responses are beyond our control. What matters is the intention and virtue behind the act of giving. As Epictetus wisely observed, don't hope that events will turn out the way you want. Welcome events in whichever way they happen. This is the path to peace. By applying this principle to generosity, we become more resilient. Instead of feeling disappointed or resentful when our efforts go unnoticed, we find peace in the act itself. The reward is in knowing that we acted in alignment with our values and principles, not in what we receive in return. This shift in perspective not only protects our emotional well-being, but also allows us to continue giving without becoming bitter or exhausted. Another vital Stoic practice that supports balanced generosity is the cultivation of self-awareness. The Stoics encouraged regular self-reflection, a practice that can help us assess our motivations for giving and recognize when we are overextending ourselves. By examining our intentions, we can distinguish between acts of genuine kindness and those driven by guilt, fear, or the desire for approval. When we give out of a sense of obligation or the fear of disappointing others, we are not acting from a place of virtue. Instead, we are reacting to external pressures, and this kind of giving often leads to feelings of resentment and depletion. True Stoic generosity, however, comes from a place of inner strength and autonomy. It is the kind of giving that enhances both the giver and the receiver because it is guided by wisdom and self-respect. Self-awareness also helps us recognize when we need to recharge. Just as a warrior cannot fight endlessly without rest, we cannot continue to give without taking time to restore our own well-being. This is why the Stoics emphasize the importance of balance, knowing when to step forward and offer help, and knowing when to step back and care for ourselves. Far from being selfish, this balance ensures that we can continue to be of service to others in the long run. Seneca, in his letters, often reflected on the importance of rest and renewal. He wrote, "We must take rest. A field that has rested gives a bountiful crop." This idea applies equally to our emotional and mental health. By giving ourselves permission to rest, to say no when needed, and to prioritize our own well-being, we ensure that we remain strong and capable, ready to give again when the time is right. Another critical aspect of Stoic generosity is the understanding that true giving is not transactional. In a world that often equates generosity with reciprocation, the Stoics offer a refreshing perspective. They teach us that the act of giving should not come with strings attached. When we give with the expectation of receiving something in return, whether it be praise, gratitude, or favors, we are engaging in a transaction, not an act of true kindness. The Stoics would encourage us to give from a place of abundance, without attaching ourselves to the outcome. This form of detached generosity is powerful because it frees us from the disappointments that can arise when others do not meet our expectations. Instead of viewing relationships as exchanges, we can approach them with a mindset of abundance, where the act of giving itself is the reward. This does not mean, however, that we should tolerate being taken advantage of. On the contrary, the Stoics believed in setting firm boundaries to protect ourselves from exploitation. Saying no when necessary is not a failure of kindness. It is an act of self-respect. By setting clear limits, we communicate to others and to ourselves that our well-being matters and that we value our time and energy. Boundaries, in the Stoic sense, are not walls to shut people out, but guidelines that allow us to engage with others in a way that is sustainable and respectful of our own needs. Just as we would not allow someone to trample our physical space, we should not allow them to overstep our emotional or mental limits. This ensures that our relationships are built on mutual respect, not dependency or obligation. The Stoics also remind us that not every battle is ours to fight. There will be times when others will seek our help, but it may not always be wise or beneficial to offer it. Sometimes, by stepping in, we prevent others from learning important lessons or developing their own resilience. Stoic wisdom encourages us to discern when our help is truly needed and when it might hinder someone's personal growth. By understanding when to step back, we allow others to take responsibility for their own lives and challenges, while preserving our own energy for the times when our help is most needed. Ultimately, Stoic generosity is about balance, intention, and resilience. It is about giving from a place of strength, setting boundaries that protect our well-being, and detaching from the outcomes of our actions. It is about recognizing that our worth is not determined by how much we give, but by how mindfully we live. So as you continue to practice Stoicism, remember that kindness, like any other virtue, flourishes best when it is grounded in self-awareness and balance. Be kind to others, but always be kind to yourself first. Let your generosity flow from a place of strength, not exhaustion, and from a place of abundance, not expectation. In doing so, you will find that your kindness becomes a source of joy and fulfillment, enriching your life and the lives of those around you without depleting your spirit. This is the Stoic way: to give wisely, to live purposefully, and to cultivate inner peace as we navigate the complexities of life. By embracing these principles, you will create a life of lasting harmony, where your generosity uplifts others while allowing you to remain whole, strong, and deeply fulfilled. As we delve deeper into the Stoic philosophy of balanced generosity, we come to understand that living in harmony with oneself and others requires continuous reflection, mindfulness, and the deliberate cultivation of inner strength. Stoicism encourages us to live a life of meaning, one that fosters genuine kindness without neglecting the self, an approach that safeguards us from becoming overwhelmed or diminished by the needs and expectations of the world. This approach begins with a profound recognition of self-worth. The Stoics believe that true strength and virtue come from within, and that each individual possesses an inherent value that is independent of external validation. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, often reminded himself to stand upright, not be held upright. This phrase captures the Stoic belief that we must develop an internal foundation strong enough to support our actions and choices without relying on the approval or recognition of others. In the context of generosity, this means that the worth of our kindness does not depend on how it is received or whether it is reciprocated. We give not because it will elevate our status or earn us praise, but because it is a reflection of our character and our values. When we embrace this mindset, our acts of kindness become rooted in something far deeper and more enduring than fleeting validation. They become expressions of our inner virtue. Yet, for this virtue to truly flourish, it must be protected by boundaries. As much as the Stoics valued generosity, they also recognize the importance of self-preservation. Just as we must care for our physical bodies through rest and nourishment, We must care for our emotional and mental well-being by setting limits on how much we give to others. Without these boundaries, we risk draining our internal reserves, leaving ourselves vulnerable to exhaustion, resentment, and even burnout. The challenge for many of us is that setting boundaries can feel uncomfortable, especially when we fear disappointing others or being perceived as selfish. But Stoicism offers a way to overcome this discomfort by shifting our focus from external approval to internal harmony. Epictetus, one of the most influential Stoic philosophers, often emphasized the importance of controlling what is within our power, our thoughts, our actions, and our decisions. Everything else, including how others perceive us, is beyond our control and should not be a source of concern. In practical terms, this means that when we set boundaries, whether it's saying no to an extra commitment or taking time for ourselves, we are not acting out of selfishness, but out of wisdom. We are ensuring that our energy and resources remain intact so that we can continue to give from a place of strength rather than depleting ourselves to the point where we are no longer able to help anyone, including ourselves. Boundaries, when properly understood and implemented, allow us to maintain equanimity. The Stoic ideal of a calm and balanced mind. By establishing clear limits, we free ourselves from the constant push and pull of external demands. We become less reactive, less prone to emotional swings, and more centered in our purpose. This inner calm enables us to give generously when the time is right and to retreat when we need to recharge, without feeling guilt or resentment. A key aspect of this process is self-compassion. While Stoicism is often associated with endurance and discipline, it is also deeply rooted in the idea of treating oneself with care and respect. Self-compassion is not about indulging in self-pity or avoiding challenges, but about recognizing when we need rest, reflection, and renewal. It's about understanding that we cannot pour from an empty cup, and that in order to sustain our generosity, we must first sustain ourselves. Seneca, in his writings, frequently spoke of the need to balance work and leisure, action and rest. He believed that true wisdom lies in knowing when to act and when to pause. In his essay, On the Shortness of Life, Seneca reminds us that life is precious and that we must not squander it by becoming consumed by endless obligations. To live well, we must manage our time and energy with care, ensuring that we leave space for our own growth, reflection, and joy. This is where moderation, another central Stoic virtue, comes into play. Moderation allows us to give without overextending ourselves, to help others without neglecting our own needs, and to maintain a sense of balance in all aspects of life. When we practice moderation, we are not denying ourselves the pleasure of giving or the satisfaction of helping others. Rather, we are ensuring that our generosity remains sustainable and that it enhances both our lives and the lives of those we serve. Moderation also teaches us to be discerning in our acts of kindness. The Stoics were keenly aware that not all requests for help are equal, and that sometimes the best way to support someone is to allow them to face their challenges independently. By carefully choosing when and how to offer our assistance, we avoid the trap of enabling dependency or fostering unhealthy relationships. Stoicism encourages us to offer help that empowers others, rather than making them reliant on our constant intervention. This principle is closely tied to the idea of respecting others' autonomy. Just as we strive to maintain our own independence and self-sufficiency, we must respect the same qualities in those around us. Sometimes, stepping back and allowing someone to struggle through their difficulties is the most generous thing we can do. It provides them with the opportunity to grow, to develop resilience, and to learn from their experiences. In this way, Stoic generosity is not about rescuing others or solving their problems for them. It's about offering support when needed, while respecting their journey and their ability to overcome challenges on their own. At the heart of this practice is the Stoic belief in human dignity. The Stoics believe that every person possesses an inner strength and capacity for growth, and that true kindness is about helping others recognize and tap into this potential. When we give wisely, with respect for both ourselves and others, we are not just offering temporary relief, we are contributing to the long-term flourishing of those around us. And yet, Stoicism also reminds us that we cannot control the outcomes of our kindness. We may offer support, guidance, or resources, but what others do with our help is beyond our influence. This is why detachment from outcomes is so essential. By focusing on the act of giving itself, rather than on how it will be received or what it will lead to, we free ourselves from the frustration and disappointment that can arise when things don't go as we hoped. Epictetus taught that true peace comes from accepting what we cannot control and focusing our energy on what we can. When we give with this mindset, we are able to maintain our emotional balance even when our efforts seem to go unnoticed or unappreciated. This detachment doesn't mean we care less. It means we care wisely, recognizing that our role is to offer what we can and then to let go. In the end, Stoic generosity is about living with intention and purpose. It is about giving from a place of abundance, not from obligation or fear. It is about being kind to ourselves so that we can be truly kind to others. And it is about recognizing that true strength comes from within, from the calm, balanced, and deliberate practice of virtue. As you continue to integrate Stoic principles into your life, remember to honor your own needs, to give thoughtfully, and to set boundaries that protect your well-being. By doing so, you will cultivate a life of deep fulfillment, where your acts of generosity are not only sustainable, but truly transformative, for both yourself and those around you. This is the Stoic way: to live with wisdom, to give with intention, and to find peace in knowing that you have done what is within your power, leaving the rest to the flow of life. In this way, you create a legacy of kindness that is as enduring as it is impactful, one that enriches your life and the lives of others without ever losing sight of the most important person in that equation: you. As we journey further into the heart of Stoic philosophy, we come to understand that Stoicism is not just a philosophy of endurance or survival, but one that aims at living a life of profound meaning, where every action is infused with purpose and thoughtfulness. It encourages us to be deliberate in our choices and to act in a way that honors both our inner nature and the world around us. When applied to kindness and generosity, this philosophy transforms how we give, allowing us to balance self-care with our desire to help others, all while maintaining peace of mind. At the core of Stoicism is the pursuit of virtue, which the Stoics believed to be the highest good. Virtue, for them, was synonymous with living in accordance with reason, nature, and our true purpose. In the context of generosity, this means giving not for selfish gain, not out of guilt, and not out of fear of disappointing others, but because it aligns with our higher principles of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. When we give in this way, we are practicing virtue, and in doing so, we are living a life that is in harmony with both ourselves and the larger world. One of the most important virtues in Stoic thought is wisdom, the ability to discern what is truly good and necessary, and to make decisions based on careful reflection. Applying wisdom to generosity means being thoughtful about when, how, and to whom we give. It means recognizing that we are not obligated to meet every demand or fulfill every request, especially when doing so would harm our own well-being. Wisdom guides us to give in ways that are meaningful and sustainable, ensuring that our generosity enriches our lives rather than depleting us. Consider, for example, the story of a Stoic sage who was known for his generosity. This sage was always willing to help those in need, but he was also mindful of his own limitations. He understood that giving endlessly would eventually leave him with nothing to give. So, he practiced a form of selective generosity. He offered his help when he knew it would make a genuine difference and when he had the capacity to do so without neglecting his own needs. In this way, the sage remained both compassionate and wise, ensuring that his kindness was effective and lasting. This kind of selective generosity is not about withholding help or being cold-hearted. Rather, it is about being strategic and thoughtful with our resources, whether those resources are time, energy, or material goods. The Stoics believe that to live virtuously, we must first care for ourselves, because only when we are in a stable and healthy state can we offer genuine support to others. As Epictetus said, "Know, first, who you are, and then adorn yourself accordingly." This means understanding our own limits and strengths and giving from a place of self-knowledge and balance. Justice is another cornerstone of Stoic virtue, and it plays a crucial role in how we approach generosity. Justice, in the Stoic sense, is about fairness, equity, and treating others with respect. It teaches us that true kindness is not about being subservient or always saying yes to avoid conflict, but about acting in ways that are fair to both ourselves and others. Justice encourages us to give from a sense of fairness, not because we feel pressured, but because we believe it is the right thing to do. It also reminds us that we are not obligated to give more than we are able, nor are we responsible for solving everyone's problems. A common pitfall in generosity is the desire to be seen as the savior or the one who always comes to the rescue. While helping others is noble, the Stoics would remind us that we should be cautious of acting out of a need for validation or external approval. True justice means treating ourselves with the same fairness and respect that we offer others. It means ensuring that our acts of kindness do not lead to imbalance, where we are constantly giving while neglecting our own needs. Justice teaches us that self-care is not only permissible, but necessary for a well-lived life. Then there is temperance, the Stoic virtue of moderation and self-control. Temperance guides us in all things, ensuring that we do not overextend ourselves, even in the practice of kindness. When we are moderate in our generosity, we ensure that we do not exhaust our resources or burn out. Temperance teaches us to pace ourselves, to give in measured amounts, and to be mindful of our own well-being. It is a reminder that overgiving can be just as harmful as not giving enough, and that finding balance is the key to lasting kindness. Imagine for a moment a river that flows too freely, flooding everything in its path. While water is life-giving, in excess it becomes destructive. Similarly, when we give without restraint, without regard for our own limits, we risk becoming overwhelmed and losing the very capacity to give. The Stoics would encourage us to think of our generosity as the steady flow of a river, constant yet controlled. In this way, our kindness nourishes others without causing harm to ourselves. Courage. The final pillar of Stoic virtue is perhaps the most challenging to apply in the realm of generosity. Courage, in this sense, is not just about bravery in the face of danger, but about the strength to do what is right, even when it is difficult. It takes courage to set boundaries, to say no when necessary, and to prioritize our own well-being. It also takes courage to give without expecting anything in return, to offer our kindness freely without attaching ourselves to the outcome. Courage in generosity means being willing to face the discomfort of turning someone down, knowing that by protecting our own energy and resources, we are making a wiser, long-term choice. It also means having the courage to trust that others are capable of handling their own challenges and that we do not always need to step in. This form of courage allows us to be both compassionate and strong, offering help when it is truly needed, but also standing firm when we must protect ourselves. By integrating these four Stoic virtues, wisdom, justice, temperance, and courage, into our approach to generosity, we create a framework for giving that is both sustainable and deeply fulfilling. We learn to give not from a place of obligation or exhaustion, but from a place of strength, balance, and integrity. Our kindness becomes a reflection of our inner harmony, and we find that we are able to contribute more meaningfully to the lives of others while also maintaining our own well-being. It is important to remember that Stoicism is not about detaching from life or avoiding the challenges that come with relationships and responsibilities. Rather, it is about engaging with the world in a way that is mindful and intentional, ensuring that our actions align with our values and that we remain true to ourselves. When we give with wisdom and balance, we are living the Stoic ideal of eudaimonia, a state of flourishing where we live in accordance with our highest virtues. In your own life, consider how you might apply these Stoic principles to your acts of generosity. Are you giving in a way that honors both yourself and others? Are you practicing moderation and setting boundaries when needed? And most importantly, are you giving from a place of abundance and strength rather than from a place of depletion? By cultivating this Stoic approach to generosity, you will find that your kindness becomes a source of joy and fulfillment, not just for those you help, but for yourself as well. You will no longer feel the weight of obligation or the burden of overgiving. Instead, your acts of kindness will flow naturally, guided by wisdom and supported by a deep sense of inner peace. This is the essence of Stoic generosity, a life where giving is a source of strength, not exhaustion, where kindness is practiced with care, not compulsion, and where the well-being of both self and others is honored in equal measure. By living this way, you not only enrich your own life, but create a ripple effect of balance, wisdom, and compassion in the world around you. As we continue exploring the Stoic approach to generosity and kindness, it becomes ever clearer that this philosophy is about creating a sustainable, purposeful way of living. The Stoics teach us to avoid extremes, to balance our actions, and to be intentional in our choices, especially when it comes to how we relate to others. In practicing these principles, we not only protect our own well-being, but also cultivate relationships that are healthier, more authentic, and ultimately more fulfilling. One of the key insights of Stoicism is that self-respect is the foundation of all other virtues. Without self-respect, our attempts at kindness can become distorted, driven by fear, guilt, or a desire for approval. This is why the Stoics emphasize the importance of self-awareness and self-discipline. By practicing these virtues, we ensure that our actions stem from our true values rather than from a need to please others or to gain recognition. This understanding leads us to a deeper reflection on the nature of authentic generosity. Authentic generosity is not about performing grand gestures or sacrificing ourselves to be seen as virtuous. It is about offering what we can, in a way that is both sustainable and meaningful. When we give from a place of self-respect and balance, our kindness becomes an expression of our inner strength, not an attempt to fill a void or earn external validation. The Stoics would remind us that true fulfillment comes from within. Epictetus often taught that external rewards, whether they be praise, recognition, or material gain, are fleeting and ultimately beyond our control. What truly matters is our inner state, our ability to live in accordance with our principles. In the context of generosity, this means that the act of giving itself is enough. We do not need to attach our self-worth to how others respond or what we receive in return. This is an important shift in mindset, especially in a world where we are often taught to measure our worth by how much we do for others or how appreciated we are. Stoicism encourages us to let go of these external metrics and to focus instead on the intrinsic value of our actions. By doing so, we free ourselves from the pressure to overgive or to seek constant approval. Instead, we can give mindfully, knowing that our kindness is a reflection of our virtue, not a currency to be exchanged for something in return. To fully embody this approach, we must also learn to recognize the difference between helping and enabling. While it is natural to want to support those we care about, there is a fine line between offering help and fostering dependency. The Stoics would urge us to help others in a way that empowers them, rather than in a way that makes them reliant on our constant assistance. This is not about withholding kindness, but about ensuring that our generosity leads to mutual growth and independence. Imagine, for example, a parent who does everything for their child, solving every problem, fixing every mistake, and making every decision. While this may seem like an act of love, it ultimately deprives the child of the opportunity to learn, to develop resilience, and to grow into their own independence. In the same way, when we constantly overextend ourselves to solve others' problems, we may inadvertently prevent them from gaining the strength and skills they need to navigate life on their own. The Stoics believe deeply in the importance of individual responsibility. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, often reflected on the need to take responsibility for one's own actions and choices. He would remind us that while we can offer guidance and support to others, it is not our role to carry their burdens for them. Each person must face their own challenges, learn their own lessons, and ultimately find their own path. Our role is to assist when appropriate, but not to take on the responsibility for others' lives. This perspective also applies to how we view ourselves. Just as we respect the autonomy of others, we must also respect our own autonomy. This means acknowledging our limits, setting boundaries, and refusing to allow ourselves to be drained by the expectations or needs of others. In doing so, we preserve our energy and ensure that we can continue to give in a way that is both genuine and sustainable. Boundaries, then, are not a barrier to kindness, but a tool for ensuring that our kindness remains rooted in strength. They allow us to protect our emotional and mental resources while still being available to help others when it truly matters. Without boundaries, we risk becoming overwhelmed, resentful, or exhausted, states that ultimately diminish our ability to offer meaningful support. The Stoic philosopher Seneca provides a clear example of this balance. In his letters, he wrote extensively about the importance of managing one's time and energy wisely. He warned against becoming consumed by the demands of others, noting that time is our most precious resource and that we must guard it carefully. By setting boundaries around our time and energy, we not only protect ourselves, but also ensure that when we do give, it is from a place of intention and care, not out of obligation or exhaustion. This brings us back to the concept of moderation, the Stoic ideal of maintaining balance in all things. Moderation teaches us to avoid extremes, whether in our relationships, our work, or our acts of kindness. It encourages us to give in ways that are measured, thoughtful, and aligned with our values. When we practice moderation, we are less likely to burn out or become resentful because we are giving in a way that is sustainable and true to ourselves. Moreover, moderation helps us avoid the trap of perfectionism. Many of us feel pressure to be perfect, to be endlessly kind, always available, and constantly giving. But Stoicism reminds us that perfection is not the goal. Balance and virtue are We are not required to meet every demand or fulfill every expectation. Instead, we are called to act with integrity, to give what we can, and to know when to step back. Stoicism also emphasizes the importance of emotional resilience. When we give without attachment to outcomes, we become less vulnerable to the disappointments that can arise when our kindness is not reciprocated or appreciated. By practicing detachment, another central Stoic principle, we free ourselves from the emotional turmoil that often accompanies unmet expectations. We can give generously, knowing that the value of our actions lies in the act itself, not in how others respond. Detachment in this context does not mean becoming indifferent or uncaring. Rather, it means cultivating a sense of inner peace, a recognition that we cannot control how others react to our generosity. What we can control is our own response, our own attitude, and our own commitment to living virtuously. This inner peace allows us to continue being kind, even when the world does not acknowledge or reward our efforts. By practicing detachment, we also learn to let go of resentment. How often do we give to others only to feel hurt when our efforts go unnoticed or unappreciated? The Stoics would remind us that such feelings arise from misplaced expectations. When we give with the hope of receiving something in return, whether it's gratitude, admiration, or even love, we set ourselves up for disappointment. But when we give freely, without expectation, we liberate ourselves from this cycle of resentment. Our kindness becomes a gift, not a transaction, and we are able to offer it with a full and open heart. In your own life, consider how you might cultivate this Stoic detachment. How might you let go of the need for recognition or reciprocation in your acts of kindness? How can you give from a place of inner abundance rather than from a desire to meet external expectations? By practicing this form of generosity, you will find that your kindness becomes a source of strength and joy, rather than a burden or a drain on your resources. As we conclude this reflection on Stoic generosity, it is worth remembering that balance, wisdom, and self-respect are the guiding principles that allow us to live a life of deep fulfillment. By integrating these principles into our acts of kindness, we create a foundation for sustainable generosity, one that uplifts both ourselves and others, without sacrificing our own well-being. The Stoic path is not always easy, but it offers a profound sense of inner peace and clarity. It teaches us to give with intention, to live with purpose, and to find strength in our ability to navigate life's challenges with resilience and grace. By embracing these teachings, you will find that your life becomes not only more balanced, but also more meaningful as you live in harmony with yourself, others, and the world around you. This is the ultimate goal of Stoicism: to live a life of virtue, wisdom, and balance, where our kindness flows naturally from a place of strength and where our generosity becomes a reflection of our deepest values and our highest potential. As we move further along the Stoic path, embracing a life of balance, virtue, and intentional action, we find that Stoicism is not just a set of abstract principles, but a deeply practical philosophy that applies to every aspect of our lives. The insights we've explored about generosity, self-respect, and boundaries form the foundation for living a life of eudaimonia. The Stoic concept of flourishing, a state of inner fulfillment and peace that arises from living in harmony with our true nature. At the heart of this flourishing is the idea that virtue is sufficient for happiness. The Stoics believe that the key to living a good life is not wealth, status, or external success, but virtue, the consistent practice of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. When we live according to these virtues, we create a life of lasting contentment because our sense of fulfillment comes from within, independent of the shifting tides of fortune or the opinions of others. This understanding fundamentally changes the way we approach generosity. Instead of viewing generosity as something we do for others at the expense of ourselves, we begin to see it as an expression of our own inner strength and virtue. Our acts of kindness, when aligned with wisdom and self-respect, become a natural outgrowth of our flourishing. They are not a depletion of our resources, but a reflection of our abundance, of the peace and fulfillment we have cultivated within. To live this way requires a shift in perspective. Instead of asking ourselves, "How much can I give?" we begin to ask, "How can I give in a way that aligns with my values, respects my boundaries, and contributes to the well-being of both myself and others?" This approach transforms generosity from a reactive, often burdensome act into a proactive, intentional choice, one that enhances our lives rather than diminishes them. In practical terms, this means adopting a mindful approach to generosity. Before we offer help or support, we pause to reflect on our motives and our capacity. Are we giving because we truly want to, or because we feel pressured to do so? Are we offering help that empowers others, or are we stepping in where they need to grow? Are we giving in a way that honors our own well-being, or are we overextending ourselves in the process? These reflections allow us to practice discernment, a key aspect of Stoic wisdom. The Stoics believe that not all actions are equal, and that true wisdom lies in knowing when to act and when to refrain. In the context of generosity, this means understanding that sometimes the most virtuous thing we can do is to say no. While this may seem counterintuitive, it is often the case that by setting boundaries and preserving our own resources, we are better able to contribute meaningfully in the long term. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, often reflected on the importance of acting in accordance with nature. For him, this meant aligning our actions with the natural rhythms and limits of life, recognizing that we are part of a larger whole and that our well-being is interconnected with the well-being of others. When we act with wisdom, we not only care for ourselves, but also create a ripple effect that benefits those around us. This idea of acting in harmony with nature also applies to the way we approach relationships. In our interactions with others, Stoicism teaches us to practice equanimity, a calm, balanced state of mind that allows us to remain centered, even in the face of challenges or difficult emotions. Equanimity helps us navigate the complexities of human relationships, where expectations and demands can often pull us in many directions. By cultivating equanimity, we develop the ability to give without attachment, to offer our kindness and support without becoming entangled in the emotional responses or expectations of others. This doesn't mean we are indifferent or uncaring. On the contrary, it allows us to give more fully and freely because we are not weighed down by the need for validation or reciprocity. We give because it is the right thing to do, and because it aligns with our deepest values, not because we expect something in return. This practice of giving without attachment is closely related to the Stoic concept of amor fati, or love of fate. The Stoics taught that we must embrace life as it unfolds, accepting both the good and the bad with equal grace. In the context of generosity, this means that we must accept the outcomes of our kindness without clinging to the hope of particular results. Whether our efforts are appreciated, ignored, or even rejected, we find peace in knowing that we have acted in accordance with virtue. Amor fati encourages us to let go of the illusion of control over others' reactions, and to focus instead on what is within our power, our own actions, intentions, and attitudes. When we give with this mindset, we liberate ourselves from the frustration and disappointment that can arise when our efforts go unrecognized. Instead, we find joy in the act of giving itself, knowing that our kindness is an expression of our character, not a transaction seeking approval. This generosity is deeply liberating. It allows us to give freely and joyfully with a burden of expectation. By practicing amor fati, we learn to love the process of giving, even when the outcomes are uncertain. In this way, is a form of an affirmation of who we are and what we stand for. As we continue to integrate these Stoic principles into our lives, we may also find that our understanding of reciprocity or changes. In many cultures, there is an unspoken expectation that kindness should be repaid in kind. But the Stoics challenge this notion, teaching us that true virtue is not contingent on reciprocity. We give not to create a debt or to expect something in return, but because it is the right thing to do. This doesn't mean that we should allow ourselves to be exploited or taken for granted. On the contrary, the Stoics emphasize the importance of self-respect and discernment in our relationships. We must be wise enough to recognize when a relationship is one-sided or when our generosity is being taken advantage of. In such cases, it is both virtuous and just to set boundaries, to step back, and to protect our own well-being. Seneca spoke of the importance of being selective in our associations. He believed that we should surround ourselves with people who reflect our values, who uplift us, and who inspire us to be our best selves. This principle applies to generosity as well. We should give to those who genuinely benefit from our kindness and who, in turn, contribute to a relationship of mutual respect and growth. In doing so, we create virtuous cycles, relationships that are based on mutual support, trust, and understanding. These relationships are not transactional, but are instead grounded in the shared pursuit of flourishing. When we give in these relationships, we do so with the knowledge that our kindness is valued and that the exchange of support is a natural part of our connection. Ultimately, Stoicism teaches us that true generosity is about cultivating a life of integrity. It is about aligning our actions with our values, practicing kindness in ways that are thoughtful and sustainable, and giving from a place of strength and abundance. By living in this way, we create a life that is not only more balanced and peaceful, but also more deeply fulfilling. As you reflect on these teachings, consider how you can apply them in your own life. How can you practice generosity in a way that respects both your own well-being and the well-being of others? How can you set boundaries that protect your energy while still allowing you to give meaningfully? And how can you cultivate a mindset of giving without attachment, finding joy in the act of kindness itself rather than in the outcome? By embracing these principles, you will find that your acts of generosity become not just acts of kindness, but expressions of your deepest values and your highest self. You will give more wisely, more freely, and with a sense of inner peace that comes from knowing that you are living in accordance with your true nature. This is the Stoic way, a path of wisdom, balance, and virtue, where generosity flows naturally from a place of inner strength and where kindness enriches both the giver and the receiver without sacrificing the well-being of either. It is a way of living that leads to lasting fulfillment, inner harmony, and a life of true flourishing. Continuing on the Stoic path of wise generosity, we see that this philosophy is not only about understanding the mechanics of giving, but also about transforming the way we relate to ourselves and others. At its heart, Stoicism teaches us that our actions, including acts of kindness, should stem from our pursuit of virtue, balance, and inner peace. It challenges us to rethink generosity, not as an unceasing obligation to others, but as a deliberate, thoughtful choice rooted in the wellspring of our inner strength and values. One of the most powerful lessons that Stoicism offers us is the concept of self-sufficiency. The idea that true happiness and contentment come not from external circumstances, but from within. This principle applies just as much to generosity as it does to other aspects of life. To be truly generous in the Stoic sense, we must first cultivate our own inner resources, ensuring that we are giving from a place of wholeness and not out of a sense of lack or obligation. The Stoic approach to self-sufficiency invites us to focus on what we can control, our thoughts, actions, and responses, rather than being overly concerned with how others react to our kindness. When we internalize this teaching, we begin to understand that the act of giving is valuable in itself, regardless of whether it is noticed, appreciated, or reciprocated. The Stoic sage gives freely, not because they need something in return, but because they are already fulfilled within themselves. Their kindness is an expression of their character, not a transaction. This shift in mindset, seeing generosity as an outpouring of our inner virtue rather than as something we do to receive validation, frees us from the co-emotional burden of expectations. Too often, our acts of kindness are tinged with the hope that they will be acknowledged, that they will strengthen relationships, or that they will elicit gratitude. But Stoicism teaches us to let go of these external dependencies. When we give without expectation, we are no longer vulnerable to disappointment or frustration when our efforts go unnoticed. By practicing this form of detachment, we can engage with the world from a position of true freedom. We can be kind, compassionate, and generous without allowing the outcomes to dictate our emotional state. This is not a form of cold indifference, but rather a powerful way to protect our peace of mind. As Epictetus taught, some things are up to us, and some things are not. Whether others appreciate or acknowledge our kindness is beyond our control, but the decision to act virtuously is always within our power. This perspective also ties into the Stoic practice of memento mori, the contemplation of our own mortality. Reflecting on the finite nature of life helps us prioritize what truly matters. It reminds us that our time and energy are limited resources, and we must be mindful of how we use them. In terms of generosity, memento mori encourages us to give in ways that are meaningful and purposeful, rather than scattering our efforts in every direction. When we remember that our days are numbered, we become more discerning about where and how we invest our time and kindness. The Stoic practice of self-examination is another tool that helps us refine our approach to generosity. The Stoics encourage daily reflection, a practice in which we review our actions, thoughts, and motivations. Through this practice, we can assess whether we are giving for the right reasons, whether our generosity is aligned with our values, and whether it is truly benefiting others without depleting ourselves. Seneca often wrote about the importance of intention behind actions, noting that it is not enough to simply perform good deeds. We must also understand why we are doing them. He urged us to question our motives and ensure that our acts of kindness come from a place of genuine virtue, not from a desire to gain favor, status, or approval. By regularly reflecting on our motivations, we can ensure that our generosity remains an authentic expression of our character, rather than a compulsive habit or a response to social pressure. The Stoic emphasis on one's self-awareness and cost of moderation also leads to a deeper understanding of the role of boundaries counts in generosity. Setting boundaries is not a sign of selfishness or a lack of compassion. Rather, it is a way to protect our own well-being so that we can continue to give in a sustainable way. Without boundaries, we risk falling into the trap of overgiving, which can lead to burnout, resentment, and a diminished capacity to help others effectively. Setting boundaries also helps us respect the autonomy of others. By constantly stepping in to solve problems or provide support, we may inadvertently prevent others from developing their own strength, resilience, and problem-solving abilities. Stoicism teaches us to respect the agency of those around us, recognizing that everyone has their own path to walk and their own lessons to learn. Sometimes, the most compassionate thing we can do is to step back and allow others to face their challenges independently. This idea brings us to a deeper understanding of what the Stoics called sympathia, the sense that we are all connected within the larger framework of the universe. While Stoicism emphasizes self-sufficiency, it also acknowledges that we are part of a greater whole and that our actions ripple out to affect others. This interconnectedness reminds us that our acts of kindness, when done with intention and wisdom, contribute to the well-being of the larger community. However, it also reminds us that we must act in ways that respect both ourselves and others, ensuring that our generosity enhances the collective good rather than creating imbalances or dependencies. When we give from a place of inner strength and clarity, we honor this sense of interconnectedness. We offer support to others while also nurturing our own well-being, creating a balanced exchange that benefits everyone involved. In this way, our generosity becomes part of a virtuous cycle, one in which kindness, respect, and self-care coexist in harmony. The Stoics also teach us the value of small, consistent actions. Acts of generosity need not be grand or dramatic to be meaningful. In fact, some of the most profound expressions of kindness are those that occur in the quiet moments of everyday life. A word of encouragement, a listening ear, a simple gesture of support. These small acts, when practiced consistently, create a ripple effect that can transform not only our own lives, but also the lives of those around us. This approach aligns with the Stoic belief in consistency of character. The Stoics valued steady, ongoing effort over sporadic bursts of virtue. In the same way, our generosity should be sustainable, something we can offer regularly without depleting ourselves. By focusing on small, intentional acts of kindness, we create a rhythm of giving that is aligned with our capacity and our values. As we continue to cultivate this Stoic approach to generosity, it is important to remember that Yuan-Nai's self-compassion is a critical component of the process. The Stoics did not advocate for harsh self-judgment or rigid perfectionism. Instead, they encouraged us to be kind to ourselves, to recognize our limitations, and to approach life with a spirit of acceptance. When we practice self-compassion, we give ourselves permission to rest, to recharge, and to acknowledge that we cannot do everything for everyone. By embracing self-compassion, we create the space to care for ourselves in the same way that we care for others. This not only preserves our own well-being, but also enhances the quality of our generosity. When we are rested, centered, and at peace with ourselves, our kindness flows more naturally and effortlessly. It is no longer a strain or a duty, but a joyful expression of who we are. In your own life, take time to reflect on how these Stoic principles can shape your approach to generosity. How can you give more intentionally, with wisdom and balance? How can you set boundaries that protect your well-being while still allowing you to support others? And how can you cultivate a mindset of detachment where your kindness is not dependent on external validation, but is rooted in your own inner virtue? By integrating these teachings into your daily life, you will find that your acts of kindness become a source of fulfillment. Not just for others, but for yourself as well. You will give more freely, with a sense of purpose and peace, knowing that your generosity is both an expression of your true nature and a contribution to the greater good. This is the Stoic way, a life of balance, wisdom, and generosity, where kindness is a reflection of inner strength and virtue, and where every act of giving enhances not only the lives of others, but also your own journey toward eudaimonia, a life of flourishing and fulfillment. As we continue along the Stoic path, the principles of balance, self-awareness, and deliberate action guide us deeper into a life of meaningful generosity. The Stoic approach to kindness is not just about giving, but about how we give intentionally, wisely, and in a way that enriches both ourselves and those around us. Through the cultivation of inner strength, detachment from outcomes, and a deep understanding of our interconnectedness, Stoicism allows us to practice a form of generosity that is not draining, but sustaining. At the heart of this practice is the understanding that true generosity is an expression of our inner virtue. It is rooted in the Stoic belief that a life of virtue is the highest good, and that all our actions, including acts of kindness, should stem from this foundation. By focusing on living in accordance with virtue, we ensure that our generosity is aligned with our deepest values and that it contributes to the overall well-being of both ourselves and the world. The Stoics believe that living virtuously is not only a source of personal fulfillment, but also a way to contribute to the greater harmony of the universe. In the Stoic worldview, the individual is part of a larger whole, and our actions, when guided by wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance, are part of the cosmic order. This sense of sympathia, or interconnectedness, reminds us that every act of kindness has a ripple effect, touching the lives of others in ways we may not always see. However, Stoicism also teaches us that generosity must be balanced with self-respect and discernment. While it is virtuous to give, it is not virtuous to give to the point of self-neglect or to allow ourselves to be exploited. The Stoics were clear that we must protect our own well-being in order to live a life of integrity and virtue. By setting healthy boundaries and giving only what we can sustainably offer, we ensure that our kindness remains an expression of strength rather than weakness. This balance requires self-knowledge. The Stoics emphasize the importance of knowing oneself, of understanding our own limits, motivations, and capacities. Through regular self-reflection, we gain insight into when we are giving from a place of abundance and when we are overextending ourselves. This practice of self-examination, which Marcus Aurelius famously engaged in through his meditations, allows us to make more mindful choices about how and when to offer our kindness. Self-knowledge also helps us avoid the trap of people-pleasing. Stoicism teaches that we are not responsible for meeting the expectations of others, especially when doing so comes at the cost of our own peace of mind. The Stoics remind us that we cannot control how others perceive us or respond to our actions. What is within our control is our intention. The decision to act in accordance with our values and to give from a place of authenticity. When we let go of the need to be liked or approved of, we free ourselves to give more genuinely and from a deeper place of inner contentment. Epictetus emphasized that external validation is fleeting and unreliable. He taught that the approval of others should never be the goal of our actions, as it lies beyond our control. Instead, we should focus on living in a way that aligns with our own principles, finding peace in the knowledge that we have acted rightly. This idea is particularly important in the context of generosity. We give not to receive praise or recognition, but because it is in our nature to be kind and compassionate. When we shift our focus from external rewards to the intrinsic value of our actions, we experience a sense of inner freedom. This freedom allows us to practice non-attachment, a core Stoic principle that teaches us to let go of outcomes and focus on what is within our control. In the realm of generosity, this means giving without expecting anything in return, whether that be gratitude, acknowledgement, or reciprocation. By detaching from the need for a specific response, we protect ourselves from disappointment and resentment. Instead, we find fulfillment in the act of giving itself, knowing that we have done our part to contribute to the greater good. Non-attachment also empowers us to navigate the complexities of relationships with greater ease. Human connections are often fraught with unspoken expectations, and our acts of kindness can sometimes create a sense of obligation or imbalance. The Stoic approach to generosity helps us avoid these pitfalls by encouraging us to give freely and without strings attached. When we give without expecting anything in return, we create space for others to respond authentically without feeling burdened by a sense of indebtedness. At the same time, Stoicism reminds us that reciprocity is not always guaranteed, and this is something we must accept with grace. Life does not always reward our good deeds, and people may not always appreciate our efforts. The Stoics teach us to embrace these realities as part of the natural order, rather than seeing them as personal failings or injustices. By practicing o amor fati, the love of fate, we learn to welcome all outcomes, knowing that they are part of the larger flow of life. This acceptance of fate does not mean passivity or indifference. On the contrary, Stoicism calls us to take active responsibility for our actions and to approach life with a sense of purpose and commitment. We are encouraged to engage fully with the world, to offer our kindness where it is needed, and to contribute to the well-being of those around us. But we do so with the understanding that the results are not ours to control. By focusing on what we can influence, our own actions and attitudes, we find peace in the knowledge that we have done what is right, regardless of the outcome. In practicing or intentional generosity, we also come to appreciate the value of now small acts of kindness. While grand gestures may capture attention, it is often the quiet, consistent acts of support and compassion that have the most lasting impact. A kind word, a moment of empathy, a helping hand. These simple actions, when done with intention and care, can transform not only the lives of others, but also our own. By cultivating a habit of everyday generosity, we create a rhythm of giving that enriches our relationships and our sense of purpose. Seneca, in his writings on the shortness of life, often spoke about the importance of using our time wisely. He urged us to focus on what truly matters and to avoid becoming consumed by trivial pursuits. In the context of generosity, this means being mindful of how we invest our time and energy. It is not enough to give for the sake of giving. We must give in ways that align with our values and contribute to the flourishing of ourselves and others. By practicing discernment, we ensure that our acts of kindness are meaningful and impactful, rather than scattered or driven by guilt. The Stoic concept of cosmic harmony also plays a crucial role in shaping our approach to generosity. The Stoics believe that we are all interconnected, part of a larger whole that is governed by reason and order. This sense of unity encourages us to see our acts of kindness as part of a broader effort to create harmony in the world. When we give, we are not just helping an individual, we are contributing to the well-being of the larger community. This perspective elevates our generosity from a personal act to a universal contribution, reminding us that our actions have far-reaching consequences. By embracing this Stoic understanding of interconnectedness, we can also develop a sense of a compassionate detachment, the ability to care deeply for others without becoming overwhelmed by their struggles. Stoicism teaches us to be empathetic without losing our sense of self. We can offer support, listen with understanding, and act with kindness, all while maintaining our own emotional and mental balance. This form of detachment allows us to be present for others without being consumed by their challenges, ensuring that our generosity is both compassionate and sustainable. As you continue to practice Stoic generosity, remember that balance is key. Kindness, when offered mindfully and with intention, becomes a powerful force for good, not only for those we help, but also for ourselves. By giving from a place of inner strength, self-awareness, and non-attachment, we create a life that is aligned with the Stoic virtues of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Take time each day to reflect on how you can bring these principles into your own life. How can you give more thoughtfully, with respect for both your own needs and the needs of others? How can you practice detachment from outcomes, finding joy in the act of kindness itself? And how can you cultivate a sense of cosmic harmony? Recognizing that your generosity is part of a larger effort to create balance and well-being in the world. By living in accordance with these Stoic ideals, you will not only enrich the lives of those around you, but also experience a deeper sense of fulfillment and peace. Your generosity will flow naturally from your inner virtue, becoming a source of strength, joy, and purpose. This is the Stoic way: to give wisely, live mindfully, and cultivate a life of eudaimonia, where generosity is an integral part of your journey toward flourishing.